Hello and welcome to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. We are continuing our discussion on mental health in faith communities because this is such a really interesting and vibrant discussion. And I still have here with me Reverend Dr. Robert Phillips. I got to get used to your title here. And he is an Episcopalian priest with the Diocese of Washington, D.C. So thank you for staying and continuing this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me stay.
Oh, no problem, anytime. One key thing I want to discuss, and particularly because I do interfaith work, I'm engaged with a lot of clergy, and sometimes, we have discussions and things come up. And even from my personal experience, when I was going through the journey of debating about becoming a pastoral counselor myself, back in the early 2000s, is dealing with pastors themselves and their mental health. They're in a very stressful position. You got everything going on, people coming at you with all kinds of stuff, and they may not be aware that they could be dealing with some form of depression, whether it's personal, something going into personal lives, professional, whatever it may be. How can these pastors feel comfortable being able to say, I need help. I need to figure out how to practice self-care. What can I do as a pastor? I'm seen as a leader. This may make me look weak. Yeah. I can't take care of my flock. Mm-hmm. What does a pastor do when they realize, oh my God, it may be a problem with me, with my mental health, with my emotional well-being?
Well, it is a part of the journey. Mm-hmm. It is a part of the journey. As you said, pastors, anyone to whom a flock is entrusted has a lot of pressure on them from the get-go. The thing that we have to remember as pastors and as pastoral counselors, as mental health providers, is we have to be aware of our stuff, knowing that our parishioners, other people with whom we come into contact, are going to do things that will trigger us. It will trigger us to go to those spaces that are not so pleasant, that are very hard emotional spaces to sit in. And we have to understand that there's a reason that this has triggered me to go there. It has nothing to do with my parishioner, has nothing to do with the person with whom I am speaking, and to know that, to be able to name and claim our own stuff, and to keep it in what I'll call a container, so that we know, I was just triggered by that. He or she just said something that took me back to a situation in my past in which I was very, very angry, and I'm getting very angry now, and I'm about to project all of my anger upon this person who has just done or said that to me. Mm-hmm. No, that's the whole countertransference piece. You gotta bring it in, and you gotta control that and keep that in your container, and that's very, very hard to do, which is why I encourage every mental health provider to have their own therapist. You must. Mm-hmm. I'll go there. Absolutely.
Yeah, it would make sense.
You've got to have your own therapist. As I interviewed with the parish where I'm currently working, one of the things that I shared with them was that I have my own therapist. And you need to know that. That needs to be a very significant question in your interviewing process of all of the candidates, because we have to take care of ourselves. We've got to be intentional about taking care of ourselves. Else, what we will do is to project all of our stuff onto our parishioners. And that's not fair. It's not right. It's not healthy. So it takes time, however, to kind of come to grips with that, to reach a point where you're able to really name and claim your stuff, what that is. It's hard to do that. But it can be done, and it should be done. It truly should be done. I've worked with a lot of parishes where that frustration is there, and pastors are just reeling from the ceiling about, I'm just so upset because, he is saying this, and she's doing this, and this group is doing that. And my question to them will always be, and why is that bothering you? Well, because it's wrong. Well, no, that's not enough. That's not real. Why is that bothering you? What are you feeling as a result of having experienced that? What are you feeling? Well, I feel like, no, take like out of it. Well, I feel that, take that out of it. What are your feelings? Do you feel betrayed? Do you feel do you feel? A lot of times anger will come up. And being angry excuse me, is really a manifestation of two feelings that are really happening. Your deepest hurt and your greatest fear. And it's manifesting itself in anger. You're enraged. And so to ask pastors, why is that thing, why did that really bother you? Well, I'm hurt. You're hurt because what? And then you start using your I statements. I'm hurt because I remember a time in which that happened before, when I, and however it all, rolls itself out. So I'm very sensitive, and I'm very sensitive to the ways in which pastors need to really take care of themselves, but there's a cost to that. They got to go and seek the help that they deserve to have. And if I can go a little bit further with that, that can be hard to find. Don't think that the first therapist that you go and meet with is going to be, that's going to be the one.
Yeah.
He or she is going to be, that's my silver bullet. It's going to be. It will take a little bit of time. It will take a little bit of time to find that just right, as we call it, client-therapist alignment. It might take some time, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it in the short term, in the midterm, and in the long term. It's worth it because self-care is something that is so needed for our pastors, for clergy, for everybody. But as we're speaking about clergy, that's so important.
I say it's interesting because I always figure it's the image, so image of strength. You're the leader, your clergy. So that I don't know if this is being humble enough to just be able to say, I can't do this. I need help. I can't do this alone. I need help.
Okay. And I think that is a key point. It depends upon also the way in which you define strength.
That's a good point. Yeah.
How do you define strength? I am showing you my strength by becoming transparent and moving to a space of vulnerability. Because we're taught, in your weakness, my strength is seen. So to know that it's all right to be vulnerable. It's all right to be vulnerable. And here again, you got to teach your congregation about that too. As you're preaching that from the pulpit, you will have to model that as well along the way. And it's all about developing relationships with other people, healthy relationships with other people. Do you do a nosedive into that from day one? Probably not. Probably not. But you ease into it. You have to be very intentional about it. And you can see how people's reactions will kind of shift and change. I did a stress relief group at an African American church in Washington a little while back. And they were phenomenal. They were phenomenal as far as coming to a space where they felt it would be safe, because I had to break it down as far as what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. But they came, and they came religiously. And they actually saw the ways in which others in the group were being healed, were moving towards spaces of wholeness that they would have never thought before. And they learned a lot about each other in just sharing your story. Stories are very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Sharing one story
is
very therapeutic. Everybody wants to talk about their story.
Yeah, it helps them open up. Now, my next question for you is dealing with, I would call it modern day technology with therapy, with the current websites that are out there now, where you can tap on your phone, tap on your tablet, go on the computer and say, hey, here's my therapist right here. What do you think of services like that?
I think that they provide a wonderful service. I think that they are perfect for a certain demographic of people. Personally, I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I need to make an appointment with you, write it down in my calendar, 4 o'clock on Tuesday, go to my therapist, have a face-to-face, etc. That's for me. We're living in an age, however, where that's not always somebody's cup of tea. And so if a therapist and a client can connect via FaceTime, however, I think it's wonderful. Anything that's going to enable you to move to a space closer to wholeness, go for it. Go for it. Closer to wholeness, though. Closer to wholeness, not towards confusion, not towards, any type of additional angst, if you will, but closer to wholeness. And if you feel a connection with the person to whom you are seeing on your tablet or on your phone, and that's the only way that you can communicate with that, connect with that person, then so be it. I've heard a lot of positive stories about it. It's just not for me.
Okay, because I've noticed like with these different platforms, it's tailored. I mean, we're so busy now, and which is not really always it's not really a good thing. But it's like I may only be able to go see my therapist after 5, and he or she doesn't offer those hours. So someone will say, okay, I can't do that. What are my options? And everything is so like, you have to have an app. There's an app.
Yes.
So people are looking more towards that. And I think one of the challenges can be is that you really don't have the human interaction. I've heard, good stories too, that it is helpful. But there's other cases like it becomes like, is this person a good fit and you're going through? I don't want to compare it to like online dating, but are you going to start going through different therapists yet to find the right one that's a good fit?
I think you're absolutely right, though. You do have to. It's a search process. It's a journey. It's a journey type of process that you're going through, and the first person that you encounter might not be the one that you have a good alignment with, and that's okay. That's okay. The good news about that is that you stepped outside of your comfort zone to actually seek help.
Yeah.
And that's 50% plus of the whole piece of this, that you did that. And I always affirm, I mean, even for the few people that have come to me that have said we don't have that great of an alignment, I affirm them at the beginning of our session in saying, I so affirm the fact that you stepped out, you made the phone call or you sent me the text to set up the appointment, and then you actually showed up. That's huge. That's huge. And people don't realize that. But I'm here to tell you that is huge.
And that's good to know, because there are therapists who are just like, after one conversation, so what medication you want?
Or they give you a book. And, when there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but
Again, it's just like, okay, this is one session. You're comparing me to the last probably 5 people you had in here.
Yeah.
So how is that going to facilitate my healing process? And nothing to say is wrong with medication, but it's going to take more than just like coming in on the first session. So.
And it's hard doing it. It's hard doing it with respect to finances. One of the things that is available to a lot of people, and maybe not to everybody, but to a lot of people, is the EAP, your Employee Assistance Program. At your job that you pay probably $2-3 a month for and may never use, and that's a huge conduit towards healing with all of these therapists that sometimes you don't even have a copay with respect to them. You just go. And so those resources are available to you, and I encourage people to use those.
Okay, great. And we're going to go to a break, so just stay tuned. We're just going to take this quick break, and we'll be right back on Interfaith Connections. Welcome back to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. Today we are still continuing our discussion on mental health and faith communities, and I still have here with me Father Phillips, who's been wonderful in this discussion. So the next thing I want to cover, which I think is a key piece, is how can clergy, faith leaders, doctors, therapists, health professionals, mental health professionals in all their capacity work together to educate not only congregations, but even the community in general about mental health, about prevention, the signs. What can they do to do that?
Well, again, it's got to come from the top. It's got to come from the top, and it's got to be an intentionality involved in it as well. To walk into, for example, a church during their worship service and to just begin talking about mental illness and bipolar and adjustment disorders and personality disorders, etc., is going to be very, very, very off-putting. So you have to develop relationships. These relationships need to be developed as far as with respect to other mental health professionals from leadership, from the pastor. The pastor has to be the one that's going to establish that relationship with the support of the lay leadership there at the church. But the pastor has to do that because then the congregation and the community will both see that the pastor has put skin in the game. And that's very, very key. That's very key. So one of the things that churches can offer is the actual space for workshops to be conducted by the mental health professionals to come in. We have this wonderful space, we'll open up our church, and we will partner with you in marketing about this event. And that is the key part. You've got to market about the event. You've got to either knock on doors, you've got to get access to listservs, you've got to go throughout the neighborhood, and I use neighborhood as opposed to community. You got to go to the houses next door to the church itself where this event is going to be conducted, and talk about the event, really talk it up, market it in a very intentional and a very passionate way. Think about what some of those sensitive points might be. Are you on your flyer, having a hard time on your job, got a troublesome boss?
You ask the questions like, how does the questions you're asking affect me? Because I tell people all the time, you can have the nicest flyer, but people always focus on, how does this thing affect me? I don't care about the nice little, that's nice, you're gonna have a little booth and all that set up, but why should I be there? Why should I care to go? How does that benefit me in being there?
And what are some of the questions that you personally need to have answered? One of the things I've seen is having a committee to go out from the church and or from the mental health agency, if you will, and actually ask people, so what's going on with you? And people will tell you, I'm having a hard time with my family. I'm a single parent. I've got young children. I'm stressed out all the time. I'm trying to meet their needs. The rest of my family lives out of town. I don't have that type of familial support that I really wish I had. We just moved here from another state way across the country. So it's, people are going through a lot of different things. Everybody has their own flavoring of ease, if you will.
Yes.
They have their own flavoring of that. So, but you really have to market it. You really have to market it, and the relationships have to be established from the very beginning in a very intentional way between the leadership of the church and the leadership of the mental health agencies to which you're trying to connect.
Okay. Now, my next question is dealing with two populations. I'm thinking veterans, and I'm thinking LGBTQI. Am I A?
Yes.
A? Okay. My last learning was at A. Okay. I mean I. So these are two different populations where you see, and maybe some even intertwined, where you may have the person who's lesbian, gay, what have you, going through depression. Wants that spiritual support, but the church may not be opening or understanding or have the awareness, knowledge. How does a person in that situation, we'll start with that person first, how can they get the help that they're seeking, maneuver, go through that process knowing that they have these barriers? Again, is that a go to another church situation? Is that being straightforward and saying, hey, this is my issue to the leadership, clergy? How does one go, work through that process? Is there any pointers or things you can give?
There are affirming congregations that are in the community. They exist. They do exist. One might want to go on that trajectory and trying to find where are those affirming congregations that are open and embracing of the LGBTQIA community. I think that, after you have heard venom spewed from the pulpit, denigrating you as a human because of the sexual orientation that you have, after X amount of time, my hope and my prayer is that you will get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you will do something. You may or may not leave that place. You may then seek therapy. You may seek a pastoral counselor to kind of talk about what's going on with you, because there was some reason for which you were drawn to that place in the first place. That need may have shifted at this point in time. And I never like to assume anything. I think that everybody has their own journey. Everything that happens to a person is a part of their life, Right. And so let's see how that's playing itself out right now. Your task may be to stay at that particular church and be in intentional conversation with that pastor or with leadership of the church or with other congregants at the church, having a conversation that engages critical theological thinking about, that's what was said from the pulpit, but there's another way to look at this. Right or wrong, good or bad, you can take the labels out of it, but it's a way to further engage in conversation that can, again, lead towards wholeness and healing. So everybody has their own way of doing that. I know I have friends who have been very frustrated in being at churches where they constantly get gay bashed. And I will ask them from time to time, well, so why do you stay? Why do you stay?
Yes, yeah.
And oftentimes they definitely have reasons. My family is at that church.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in that church. This church, there are certain people at the church who are very supportive of me. I just tune it out when the pastor starts spewing that stuff from the pulpit. So people have different ways of managing the situations in which they find themselves at given points in time. My hope and prayer, though, is that they will always have a desire to, once again, I use these two terms an awful lot, move towards healing and wholeness, however that's going to look for them, because it's going to be different from one person to the next, and being respectful of that and knowing that you're going to do things in your own time, and that's all right. It's good. It's good.
Now with veterans, I know they have military chaplains for those while they're serving, but we also see veterans who are in need of assistance, and they may not have that same kind of access or support. How can, I guess particularly because I said, no, you're not military, right?
No,
I never
correct.
assumed. Okay. But even like when veterans are disconnected from maybe those services or those resources, what other avenues could they take? Or they may not be comfortable going to those sources. What other avenues could they do, or what can be done from a veteran's perspective?
Well, these days, in our current political environment, veterans are getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so. I think that the resources are there. I really can't speak a lot to the ins and outs of the veteran environment, if you will. What I will say, however, is that whenever I have had the opportunity to engage in a counseling conversation with a veteran, my whole MO is listening. Let them tell their story, because what I don't know, and I'm not trying to fill in any blanks. Tell me your story, and in their story, you can feel the emotion that's going on at that point in time, and then try to drill down on that emotion. But just listen to the story. Listen to the story. That can be so therapeutic, as I've said before.
Yeah. Speaking of therapeutic, I have another question for you in that arena. What are your thoughts on journaling? That seems to come up a lot. You should keep a journal. Journal.
Yes.
Journal. Right.
And I am that one that encourages people to journal. I ask people, do you journal? And more often than not, the response is, well, I used to, but I don't do it anymore. I do it, but it's just so much. One thing, a lot of times people confuse journaling, that which should be in a journal, with that which should be in a diary.
Right.
And they're two different things. In a diary, this morning I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I brushed my teeth, and you just recount all the things that have happened during the day. A journal is all about how you felt about the things that happened during
that's a good explanation,
the day.
because I feel like sometimes it's not clear.
Yes.
It's like, that sounds like a diary. Like,
It's just, exactly. And you just blow it off. It's like, why do I need to relive what I just went through? And it took me through all this stuff. So asking yourself, okay, how do I feel? And so for those clients that come to me, and parishioners that come to me and give me a little bit of resistance, a little pushback when it comes to my request for them to journal, I explain the difference between the two. And then I say, let me just invite you to journal just one word per day at the end of the day, or at some point during the day. Typically it's best to do it at the end of the day. Just one word. Happy, depressed, sad, whatever. One word, and then close the journal and go to bed. And they're like, just one word? Sure, just one word. But do it every day. I tell them to do it every day between the time that I give them that assignment until the time that we meet again. And on the day that we meet the second time, bring your journal and let's just look at the words. And they are, all, without exception, amazed at how their feelings have gone up and down, etc. And one client recently asked me, well, what if I put the same word down every day? Well, and it makes sense that you might have some concern about that.
Yeah.
And one of the key words that might be used, that is used a great deal, is frustrated. Frustrated, frustrated. Well, what does that really mean? You're frustrated, your frustration feels like what? Well, it feels like anger. Cool, that's your word. You know, and so to push yourself, I keep seeing the same thing over and over and over again. Well, you probably are not feeling the same thing over and over again because each day has brought about a different set of experiences. Okay. So let's fine tune those emotions along the way. I have a whole sheet of emotions that I give, emotions and feelings that I give to my clients. And I say, you know, use this as a little cheat sheet and see what happens in here. And first of all, when they see all these words, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know I could feel so many different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can. And you can. So I love journaling.
Okay, cool. Just want to know. Okay, so we're definitely out of time. So we'll make sure all of Father Phillips' information is on the website, www.interfaithconnections.squarespace.com. Thank you for watching and take care. Goodbye.